Welcome back, everybody, to the Growing Band Director podcast. This is episode number 83, and we've done a lot of episodes, and the mission of the show is to try to hit all the band levels the most we can to help everybody with their programs year-round. And we've done a lot of middle school stuff and high school stuff, but not enough beginning band, so I'm told. So this is a wonderful opportunity to be with two great experienced teachers. First, on my right, Larry Jackson from Falmouth Schools. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
And my wife, Krystle Smith from Westbrook Schools. Thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
Yep, two great beginning band teachers, and I'm really excited for what our conversation has in store today. So first, let's start off with sort of big picture. What does year one look like? Like how many concerts do you do? What are your goals for first year?
Well, mine starts at the beginning. You have to start with beginning band. You really have to plan everything out very carefully. With the students come to school without instruments at first. We do instrument assembly that first week, and then I invite high schoolers to come and have a big rental meeting on a Saturday, and the high schoolers come in and they give them their introductory lesson where they show them how to assemble the instrument without breaking it and how to take it apart without breaking it and hold it, and embouchure, how to form the embouchure and do the first few notes. And that really gets you off to a good start at the beginning. Is that about what you do?
Yeah, pretty similar. And I know we'll talk about this a little bit more because I see it on the list, but we start band, really, a lot of the kids come to fifth grade and they don't even know what being part of the band is. So I've used a lot of materials. There's a whole series online, you can find them, called Be Part of the Band, by Scott Lang, and he's put together these intro videos of, this is a flute, this is a clarinet. Like, we end up doing a lot of that stuff at the middle school because we have a lot of kids who move in for grade 5. So even if they, were in grade 4 in another school, no guarantee that they got all of that pre-band curriculum that we do in Westbrook. So we do that for the first 2 months of school and introduce it to every single kid, knowing that some will pick an instrument and some won't. So we actually don't start band until November in their 5th grade year. We used to do signups kind of in the spring of their 4th grade year and get them ready for 5th grade. But post-COVID, we found the timing of that wasn't great. So we decided to kind of back it up a little bit. And it's changed things throughout the year. So we have 2 concerts. We have one that's in February is their first concert, and then their second concert is going to be coming up in the second week of May. So those 2 concerts really dictate like how we run the rest of the curriculum and everything.
Was that just post-COVID that you started doing?
Yeah, we used to do 3 concerts because the kids were really ready to start instruments really in the beginning of September, because we had done all of that pre-band work with them in 4th grade, but we now do that pre-band work in their 5th grade year. So it kind of backed things up.
That's kind of interesting because I have done sort of the opposite, not anything to do with COVID, but for many years I did a pre-band program for the first 2 months.
Yep.
I have a closer connection now with the 4th grade general music teacher than I used to. And so I flipped it to what you used to do.
4th grade, right? Yeah.
They get second week instruments, and then we just sort of jump right in.
Yeah, you kind of think about how it works best for your program. So our 4th grade is divided up into 3 separate schools.
Oh boy.
The grades often meet at the exact same time. So if I was going to do testing and instrument suitability for grade 4, I would have to literally start in like January to get them all done by the time that I got to the springtime. So when that started happening, and then they wouldn't let us in the building during COVID time, and I was like, this is not working right now. So we backed it up, and this is really our 2nd year running this kind of a schedule, and I think it's going to work. I really think that the 5th graders, shockingly, are not farther behind than if I had started them in September. So it's worked out for us.
It's interesting, isn't it? Like, what your goals are.
Yep.
And you adjust.
Yes.
Every year. I've had so many different schedules.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about schedule later, but
But all of the schedules were a result of something that was happening outside of my program. And I just had to keep on refocusing. All right, this is what I want to happen. How do I make it happen?
Yep.
and you just do whatever you have to do
It's true.
to make it happen.
Yeah, supplemental exercises or whatever you got to
Yeah.
do to like, this is what they need, so this is what we're going to do
Yep.
to get them to the end. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I do the 3 concert model. With the first concert in December, you know, they play unison songs from the book,
Yep.
and
Same.
maybe you know, a 2-part thing, and maybe one very beginning, 1/2 grade band piece.
Yep.
Yeah.
So our first concert is completely 100% an informant, as I call it. They basically tell the audience through a narrative that we have written out the story of what it's like to be in beginning band for the first 3 months.
Oh, nice.
And we start literally with, this is what the kids all sound like on their mouthpiece. And it's this like god awful sound with every single mouthpiece, but then we go through, this is what the flutes sound like, this is what the clarinets sound like, and we kind of go through everyone. Of course, they get to the trumpets and the trombones, everybody's cracking up, dying, laughing about that. And then we go through, this is what their first note sounds like, their second note, their third note, play hot cross buns. You know, there's like a way to have the parents see, like, it's not just throw your instrument together and let's go. Like, there's this really slow progression that leads to them finally being able to do a song like hot cross buns. It takes a long time to get there, but it's great because every year I get feedback about, wow, I didn't know that that's really what it took at the beginning. So
I like that. I might steal that.
Yeah. I had the script all written out and everything, so you can have at it.
And you always do it with one of the other co-teachers, right? So like
Yes.
somebody's announcing while you're conducting.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, you get whoever you want to get. Get your principal, get another teacher, somebody who loves being on the stage with you or whatever. And yeah, I mean, they really play it up. And the kids love it too, because they are totally acting the whole time as they're playing. And that's part of performing. So they dig it. The kids really like doing it.
And at one point she even says, like, we teach them about posture. So like then they all show the audience really bad posture and they all lay down on their chairs and it's super funny. And
That's
then
cute.
Yeah. Yep.
One thing I do in about the beginning of November is I have a bring your parent to rehearsal day. My big band rehearsal happens first thing in the morning, and so all the parents pile in, and we sort of go through something like that,
Yeah.
where we're showing how we get from step A to step B.
Yep.
And it ended up being a really good PR thing. Because sometimes things that happen in rehearsal, when put through the lens of a 5th grader and then told at home at the dinner table, sounds kind of odd.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally.
So it's really good to have the parents come in and they're like, oh, now I understand that story about,
Yep.
you know, about
Yep.
the squeaky clarinets or whatever it
It's
was.
true.
Or
Yeah.
some joke I made, and she was like, oh yeah, now I understand that joke. It was funny.
Yeah,
Type
totally.
thing, so.
It's just interesting because with beginning band, often we talk about this piece that we want them to play, and really we do so much more than that because all of those fundamentals take so long to develop, and they're really the most important part. I mean, great, they can play through a piece of band music, but isn't what we do like so much more than that? And if there's a way to perform that, that's great.
Yeah.
So I think every 5th grade band, or 4th grade if you teach 4th grade, it's something in some way, get the parents involved, get them to see the process as a whole group, not just your one kid practicing at home, but like how we function as an entire band, because this is what they're going to be doing for the long haul.
Yeah.
So I'm interested how you guys set up your instrumentation and what you do, because I know what we do in Westbrook, we took from Larry.
Yep.
And you came in and helped us many years ago.
Yep.
So I want to tell people about that, the pre-band testing with the suitability and IMMA testing. And then, like, do you have limits on certain sections and all that?
Yeah. I've tried all kinds of different things. You're talking about instrumentation and having set numbers of instruments, and I try to do it. See, what I do is we start in the 4th grade with the IMMA testing, and for those who don't know what it is, it's the intermediate measures of music audiation, based on Edwin Gordon's music learning theory. And that gives you a starting point where you have like, they give you, each child has a tonal aptitude score and a rhythmic aptitude score. And it's not like a regular test where, you know, you get 50% and you failed the test. No, that's not what it is. It is, every score is like 50% means that that child has scored better than 50% of children who take that test. So it's a pretty good score. 50% is pretty good score. So I use those IMMA tests to just try to steer kids towards instruments that they'll be successful with. Certain instruments in the beginning, all instruments require music aptitude. They do. But there are some instruments in the very beginning where if a child doesn't have a high enough music aptitude, they can't hear the difference between high and low notes, or they can't hear the difference between the different rhythms. There's certain instruments that they want to avoid, at least to start. And another interesting thing about music aptitude is that you can affect change on a child's music aptitude. So if you have a child who's quite intelligent, intelligence and music aptitude don't always go together. But you can teach a child to type on a clarinet until their ears catch up. So they still could be playing the right notes, the right rhythms through their intellect, and then eventually it'll affect some change in their music aptitude, and they'll do well.
Have you ever watched kids or seen kids in the high school and you like quickly look back and see what their scores were when they were in fourth grade?
Yes, sometimes.
I am blown away by this because I remember, a kid in fifth grade and I matched them with a certain instrument for all the reasons that we're going to talk about. And it was for a reason. And I remember writing down that reason, and they happened to pick that instrument that I recommended. And like you said, it was like their aptitude caught up. And they're incredibly musical as an older student. And we selected this instrument for them because they had a really hard time hearing the difference between high and low, for instance. And, as a clarinet player, because that was a good match for them when they were a junior or senior, and they're making all state. These kids clearly, like, they've got a good handle on their musicianship at that point, and obviously can tell the difference. So it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's a good process.
I sometimes will look back when it's like, why aren't they getting this? And then I'll look back as,
Not a
okay,
match.
there is a reason for that. Because I don't put limits on instruments. I don't tell kids that they can't play an instrument. It is a jumping off point for discussions at home between parents and children. And I caution parents, sure, the most common question is, can you pick something that child's not suited for? The answer is yes. And then, but there may be a price to pay. How much time do you want to devote to helping your child get through something that's really hard because, they're just not really suited for it. And, or are you going to let them quit? That type of thing. I often think, like, if I had chosen the flute when I was in the fourth grade, I probably wouldn't be a music teacher, because I just, the shape of my lips, and it took me years to get a decent sound on a flute. And I wouldn't have waited years in the fifth grade. If I was on that instrument. So it's important.
So the other part of that, Larry talked about the testing. We both do instrument suitability testing too. So this is an incredible process. We have gone through this, I don't know, how many years have we been doing this now? Like 10, 12?
Long time.
Okay, a long time. We have now fifth grader, but we used to do it in fourth grade. Every fifth grader tries a flute mouthpiece, a trumpet mouthpiece, and a trombone mouthpiece. And it's pretty incredible when you teach the basics about teaching those three mouthpieces, what that tells you about that kid's ability to be able to play that instrument very early in fifth grade. Flute is almost black and white. It's almost like a yes you can or a no you can't. And it's hard being that harsh, but on our paper we see it. The kids don't see that kind of yes no. They'll get recommendations. So I actually literally stole the paper from Larry. It is his paper. It's the same one that I use. And, if a kid can't make a sound on that flute head joint to start, they're not going to get recommended for flute. And we coach them a little bit because, of course, there's definitely, within 3 minutes or so, a possibility that they could get a sound out. But if they struggle with that head joint, life is going to be horrible for them in the first month of band.
Oh yeah, totally. And then there are those kids that put a flute head joint to their face and makes
And
a
it's
beautiful
out
sound. Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I do want to mention, I never share music aptitude scores
Yep.
with parents or
Same.
students,
Same.
because it cuts both ways.
Yep.
If they're in the 99th percentile, oh, I don't need to practice.
Yep.
Or if they are 0%, which is 1 or 0%, oh, there's no hope. You know, I can't do it because I'm terrible at music. So,
Yep.
you know, it's really just one piece of the puzzle. So,
Yep. And we've had several, again, I always look at the kids who make all-state or honors band at the high school level. And then like, I'll quickly run back to their scores and be like, oh my gosh, there were some 0s and 1s and 20s. And, you know, these weren't all kids that were off the chart with their music aptitude when they were in 4th or 5th grade.
Yep.
So that tells you right there, you're making a difference.
it's a lot of work, but it saves you so much trouble later on.
Yes.
Because I haven't had a trumpet player who couldn't make a sound on a trumpet in decades.
Yep.
Because I test all the kids.
I noticed a huge difference with the brass when we started
Yes.
doing this. Huge.
Yeah, and percussion.
And
Percussion's
percussion.
the other black and white
Yes,
one.
percussion is the other
So
black and
it's
white.
like 50% or higher rhythm at least, and I'd say like 40% or higher tonal,
Yep.
because the percussion, the terrible what do you call it, like stereotype of the percussionist, oh, they can't play anything else, put in percussion,
Yeah.
is the worst idea.
It's the hardest one for them.
I
It's
know,
the
it's so
hardest
hard.
instrument for a 5th grader to like come in and be able to do successfully unless they have the aptitude for it. And it gets such a bad name that, oh, any kid can play drums.
But I haven't had a drummer in a long time who followed my advice,
Right.
who got in there and couldn't do very well.
Right.
So yeah.
So, and if somebody's going against your recommendation, I know one thing that you say something about, like, is your kid a worker, right?
Yep, that's on the form
Are
too.
they willing to work through something
Yep.
being hard or not?
Yep, and there are definitely kids. We have a kid at the high school right now who I actually remember the conversation with her family, because I was like, listen, this isn't a great match for her. We're actually like almost to capacity in this section. This could be really tough. Is she a hard worker? It was my question. And they were like, absolutely. She's a super hard worker, and she's very successful, very successful, more so than some of the kids who they were a match.
Yep.
So how do you use these scores to actually tell students, like, what score is good for flute? What's good for clarinet? Can we go through each instrument?
Well, it does depend a little bit on what Larry calls town norms. So over the years, we have definitely said, okay, this will work for us. I work really hard with those numbers also to balance instrumentation too. So as they come in with registrations, I'm keeping track of how many of each instrument I'm going to take. For us, this is off the top of my head because I don't have my town norms in front of me right now. But for flute, the aptitude is actually doesn't need to be very high. I think it's probably 0 or 1% or higher. But the head joint is required, so has to be able to make a sound on the head joint. For clarinet and saxophone, the two things that we look for are like body size and finger size, but any aptitude will work for those instruments. And we don't test mouthpieces because we find it's a lot easier for kids to make a sound on those mouthpieces than almost any other one. For the brass instruments, the high brass instruments, I have the tonal score. It's like right around 40 or 50, and rhythm score probably about the same. Again, this is very much off the top of my head. Trombone would be a little bit higher tonally, and can be a little bit lower rhythmically. And then for percussion, those are the highest for us. And I think we're probably in like the 60, 70 percentile and higher for those. So high rhythm, high tone. High tonal.
Well done, Krystle.
Yeah, that's right off the top of my head.
The student becomes the teacher.
Thank you, Sensei.
Well, so for people who are questioning the percussion, why percussion high and tonal score?
Because you have to hear everything when you're a percussionist.
Yeah.
Like, not only do you have to hear your own part and your own ability to like listen to yourself play, but you also immediately at that age, you've got to listen to everybody else play, because
Yep.
you're not going to be able to be a snare drummer in the back of the band if you can't actually play and listen at the same time. That
And your
requires
part-
a high tonal score.
Your part is different, but you have to fit it in different. It goes. One thing I say all the time to my 5th and 6th grade percussionists is, you're not playing with the band.
Yep.
You're playing by yourself.
You're playing by yourself.
Play with the band.
Yeah.
And if they have, enough aptitude, enough rhythmic and tonal aptitude, they go, oh, you're right. All right. I got to listen a little bit harder.
Yep.
And sometimes I'll demonstrate, this is, flute players play this, and I'll play the part with, this is how it fits together. It's like
Yep.
pieces of the puzzle fitting together. You have to try it from all kinds of different angles.
Yep. I often have sectionals with percussionists that I'll just pick up another instrument, or I'll pop on a recording, and the whole mission of that day is we're listening to everybody else while we play to make sure that you're playing with somebody else, with another part. And it is required of other instruments, but not in the same way that percussion is required, because their part is always so much different. It's just not the same. You've got flutes doubling clarinets, potentially doubling saxophones or whatever, but the percussion is totally on their own.
Yeah.
So
it is exciting when you see the light bulb go off, though.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you can tell it's like flipping a switch. They can do it, and then they're off and running. They forgot they ever couldn't do it.
Yeah.
It's like.
Yep.
And we're not here to promote certain brands of instruments, or necessarily put down other brands. But what are some tried and true Yamaha?
Yep.
In general, what else?
Vito,
LeBlanc,
Gemeinhardt.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
The old Holton trumpets were great. We've done Holton and Yamaha for trumpet, Holton for trombone, Yamaha for trombone.
And then for percussion, Ludwig Pearl.
We get the combo kits.
I send home a letter each year cautioning parents about ISOs. In the business, they call them instrument-shaped objects, which are shiny, pretty. You can get them in any department store or on Amazon. And so they're suspiciously cheap. And they're made out of softer metal, poorly put together. They don't hold their alignment. They play out of tune. The valves on the trumpets don't work well. They stick all the time, and
corks fall off.
Yeah, it's terrible. And then some repairmen refuse to repair them. Because the repairmen get blamed. I don't blame them. But
they go to fix it, and then 2 weeks later, it's got to go back again. And they're like, didn't you just fix this? And they're like, yes, the metal is soft and it's unaligned again. So yes, we do the same thing in Westbrook.
So for percussion, you have every kid play mallets first, right? And then they're allowed to play snare drum and other things as they go along.
Yep. Once we get to a place where the rhythms are starting to develop a little bit more quickly for a snare drum part, I quickly switch to Ted Reed Syncopation, and I do some lessons where kids are learning just correct sticking, and we do some like play along tracks. I mean, I do some kind of unconventional things with my percussion class because it doesn't always work well in the method book. So I switch them to, I'll use drum pads, oddly enough, because I don't have 10 snare drums nor would I want to have 10 snare drums playing at the same time. But Ted Reed's Syncopation book is great because it's super progressive and it's simple, and it is like obnoxiously boring, but it's wonderful because it's so simple. And I'll put on, like, today I did Michael Jackson's Smooth Criminal, and we worked on quarter notes and eighth notes, and the kids were very happy, and it was great. But it was a great way to get them doing some more drumming, but we weren't working straight out of the method book because it doesn't always progress the way that I want it to.
And when you force them to read from the beginning, they just progress faster.
Yeah, they really do. I didn't get a lot out of starting them on snare drum and then trying to get them to backtrack and
you
do
can't
mallets.
go in
That direction didn't really work out for me. So, yeah.
Yeah, I do similar.
What about setting up of instruments? A lot of teachers will like take the instruments ahead of time and put tape in certain places and
the
all these
prepared
things.
instrument.
I'm curious about what you guys do for that.
Yeah.
I don't do much with that. Caitlin Ramsey is the master.
And I stole it. Basically,
instruments.
all my good ideas I've stolen from somebody else. I just want to say that out loud. So if you get an idea from me, it's probably from somebody else. But yeah, I stole that from Caitlin, and the prepared instrument thing has been so amazing. It really has been an absolute gem. I used to get after flute players for their contact points all the time because you cannot go from a D to a C on flute, which happens very often, extremely early in flute playing. You cannot do that without the contact points being right. And so every lesson I'd be reminding first finger on the side of the flute, put your thumb down, making like all of those things that you have to like say over and over again. Well, I just put painter's tape on those spots. Everybody make sure your fingers are on the blue tape. Like that's, and that has made that whole process way easier. And I just do that way ahead of time. Head joint alignment is also crucial on flute. So just putting a little Sharpie dot to make sure that they're aligned and that the flute isn't pushed in all the way so that it actually plays in tune. Those things have been really, really helpful. Of course, clarinets. You all know clarinet can be a real pain in the butt in the beginning. But I do like a white paint pen just dotting the joints all the way down so that when they actually go to align them, they can see this is the back of the clarinet and that I'm not going to turn the joints around and around and around and around to get my clarinet together. They can see the dots and the dots go and they wiggle them right together. And it's been great. So
When did you start doing that?
So I started doing that probably 3 years ago because of COVID. I actually was
right, because you can't be there.
I was one of those crazies who decided I was going to start beginners online. And so we did the prepared instrument thing so that when they were on screen with me, I could refer to the white dots on the back of their instrument.
That would have been good.
Yeah. It's been great. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to keep doing this because like their parents have no clue how to put their instrument together. But if I talk about the white dots on the back of the clarinet, it does help a little bit.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So what do you do to the other instruments?
Trumpets get a painter's tape spot on their right thumb and the top of the pinky key. Pinky key, woodwind player. Pinky ring. And then the trombone.
On the top of it, not inside.
On the top of it. Yeah. Thanks, trumpet player, Mr. Smith. And then the trombone gets a line to connect the slide to the bell joint. So there's a line on the slide joint and there's a line on the bell joint, and that allows them to put it together so that it's not like way far apart or way too close together. And then saxophone, I actually dot the key pearls that they're using. And I dot the keys that they use for flute too, because, you know, like every beginning flute player wants to constantly move their second finger up and down on the left hand, or they don't put their right hand down far enough or whatever. So those are the big things. I usually also dot the top ligature screw of both clarinet and saxophone so that they don't put their ligature on upside down.
Yep.
That's been really helpful. And then for pretty much, I mean, I feel like this is tough. So if you're a saxophone player or a clarinet player, I apologize ahead of time, but I do put a little line where I think the mouthpiece should at least start. It's a good place to like begin tuning, because, you know, like beginning saxophone players are like, I can't put the mouthpiece in anymore, and it's got like there's like 5 inches of cork showing and it's hanging off of the end. So that drives me crazy. So I know it's not like a perfect thing, and the kid will probably argue with their high school teacher, sorry, Mr. Smith, about that's where the line is. But we try to like talk about tuning as they go through middle school. And yes, I told you the line was where it was supposed to be when you're in 5th grade, but this is a little flexible here. So little basics like that have helped a lot.
So what do you insist on during the first year? Like what aspects, you know, there's teachers, and I'll list them off here. You know, some people think a lot about tone production, some think more about articulation and their posture, or learning a lot of rhythms or technique, or like sort of what's big for you?
Embouchure is really big for me. And you can solve so many intonation things, like, you know, clarinet and saxophone, the double lip issue, trying to get that going. Trumpets with and this is something I want to mention with the suitability thing. I watch for puffy cheeks on that, because that's hard to correct. You can correct it, but if they're starting out there, it's really hard to stop. So that was another thing that was hard during COVID, because they were wearing masks, and I couldn't.
They took the masks off and everybody's got cheeks puffing everywhere. Yeah, that was fun.
Let's see. The hand position on the drums are things that I insist on. The kids want to do reverse grip. They want to hold with their back 3 fingers as opposed to their index and thumb.
Or they want to stick their first finger out like that.
Yes, they want to stick the first finger up. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to correct.
Yeah.
You have to almost break them of it.
Yeah.
But yeah. What are some things?
What do you
had?
insist on?
Tone for sure. Tone so much to the point that I do mouthpiece work every class that they're in 5th grade. I never miss a class where I'm not doing some sort of mouthpiece work, because it takes a while for those mouthpieces, especially clarinet and saxophone, to really play in tune. And some kids won't get it their entire 5th grade year, but it tells you so much about what's going on with their embouchure, and how their alignment is. And then of course, buzzing on the mouthpieces for the brass instruments. I mean, that's just so crucial to everything. So that is probably number one.
Can I give a hint real quick? No,
Sure.
don't forget your thing.
Yeah.
But I'm doing this to the video, but I know a lot of people are not watching the video. If you hold your brass mouthpiece, don't hold it around like this, right? Like hold it with your fingertips. And then I was actually taught to put a little bit of the meat of my pinky over the edge of the end of the hole, just to cover it like a quarter, because it gives a little bit more resistance and helps with the response of the buzz. So that's what I've always done.
Thanks. Good tip. I'll use that next week. Hand position, I emphasize like immediately. Anytime that I'm teaching those first, second, third lessons, it's part of establishing good habits. So that's really important. And then posture, I talk about right away too, because we all know that bad posture equals bad sound. So that's what I explain to the kids too. And they're not used to it. Like, kids don't have core strength immediately coming into band. So unless they've developed it through something else, you're their opportunity to kind of develop that. And it goes right along with breathing and everything too. So,
And my thing, that leads to tonguing for me.
yes.
And I tie tonguing to rhythm. Once they get to quarter notes, I start
Yeah.
really emphasizing tonguing. And I use different tonguing syllables for different instruments, like clarinets or T, to get their tongue high in their throat. I use toe for saxophones to get the lip off the reed more. And then ta for a lot of but I teach them, like I'll have them do echoes. So I'll say, repeat after me. Like if I'm doing saxophones, toe, 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 and they say it back. And I say, okay, now pretend you're a ventriloquist and put one hand under your chin and stop your jaw from moving. So then they go toe, 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 toe.
Yeah.
Now remove your voice. Toe, 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 toe. And then we start doing echoes back and forth. Saxophone's the hardest one for tonguing because it's so easy to produce sound on saxophone without tonguing.
Yes.
And some people can be fooled. I tell kids that I have one superpower. I have X-ray vision. I can see at your mouth. I know when you're not tonguing, so you can't fool me. And saxophones get either the hooting of an owl, or this one makes my skin crawl. The glottal stop. Oh my gosh, that drives me crazy. And I have to stop that. I'm like a dog with a bone on that one, so they eventually yield.
So it's
a battle of will.
Do you do that work without their mouthpieces too, without anything in their mouth, or do you do it with?
I do it with instruments.
Yeah. So quick tip. I don't know if this is something people will find interesting. This was like one of those teaching moments that I was like, I can't believe that actually worked. And I've done it ever since. Because no one taught me to do this. This is my one brilliant idea. This is it. This is all I've got, everybody.
Brace
Here we go.
yourselves.
Brace yourself. But I've had a lot of kids, unfortunately, who really struggle to like have that like tactile, my tongue must hit the reed thing. It doesn't seem to happen with other instruments, but with the reed instruments, it absolutely does. Like, kids avoid hitting the reed and the mouthpiece. And so I will have them not play a note at all. They'll blow into their mouthpiece and literally go, no sound, just air.
Yes.
So that they feel their tongue actually having contact with the reed and the end of the mouthpiece. And then when they go to play an actual note, they can get that same action because they feel it, they hear it. It's made a huge difference for my non-tonguers.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's
Well,
all I've
that's a
got,
good one.
everybody.
Yes. Copyright that. Oh yeah. Okay. Insisting. I've often told people that my bands sound good because as a professional musician, I can only stand hearing wrong notes for
Oh, that's the
a
truth.
certain amount of time. And I'm amazed sometimes when I hear performances where there's lots of mistakes and it's like I couldn't do it.
I mean, we're professional musicians. Like, we know what's supposed to sound good. And yeah, we
And
teach beginning band.
I have a little sort of a game. I used to call it accuracy contest, but then I got too competitive, and then I called it accuracy game, but it's not fun enough to be a game. So now I call it the accuracy challenge. And what I do, and you have to be very careful when you set this up, because I think a lot of times people underestimate fifth graders, what they can do and what they can't, what they can do. And they sort of stop at some point, but you have to focus them into, getting all the right notes and rhythms.
Mm-hmm.
So I preface it with, it's not the end of the world if you make a mistake, but how many people think it's a good goal to get all right notes and rhythms? And they'll all raise their hands.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll say, okay, we're going to play this 3 times, and I pick a section of the music. And this is well into the rehearsal. This is like 3 to 4 weeks before a concert.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'll say, all right, so measures 10 to 20. I'll give them a minute to practice it on their own, get it all under their fingers and everything. And so I say, okay, we're going to play it 3 times. If you make any kind of mistake, just stop playing and start doing fingerings, silent fingerings. Nobody will know. And then if you make it all the way through the first round, we'll go on to the second round. And if you make it all the way through the second round, we'll go to the third round. And if you make it through the third round, then you are ready on this concert on those 10 measures. So you have to be careful because it can, there's no crying in the accuracy challenge, like no crying in baseball.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to set it up with a little bit of humor and stuff like that. And I've found what it does is it really focuses them in. Oh, you mean you really want me to play all the right notes and rhythms? Okay, now
all
I
of
get
you,
it.
not just some of you,
Yeah,
but all of you.
It's on.
Yeah.
Okay, I get the challenge and everything, and it sort of brings them up to that last level of playing. It's a simple little thing, but and what I've been doing in this last couple of weeks is I'll pick, the hardest 8 measures, and then I'll pick it, or no, not hardest, maybe the second hardest 8 measures. Then the next rehearsal, I'll do the hardest 8 measures and sort of work my way around. And kids start to realize that they need to really prepare it carefully. And it really just brings the level of musicianship up. So
I'm stealing that. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh,
That's
yeah.
great.
Go do take that one.
That's great.
So the method book is not the end all and be all, especially depending on schedules. I know we haven't talked about scheduling yet, but I think everybody listening probably understands the ideal schedule is to have separate instruments through the week and then also have a combined band time at some point. But so let's talk in an ideal world. First, on the method book thing, what are some method books you guys like?
I've been using Standard of Excellence for a number of years. It's a pretty complete method. It moves at an appropriate, I think, speed. I've used several different ones over the years. I started out with First Division. Remember First Division? Do they still sell that? They must.
I don't know if they do.
It was so big.
I have a lot
for
of them
long
in my
time.
library.
And I used that for several years. I tried the Ed Sueda method, and I used that probably 5 years. And that was a good method. It took too long to get to eighth notes or rhythms that you needed to play any type of band music. I did Jump Right In for a while, which is the method that is based on Edwin Gordon's music learning theory. That one I think would work well if you were in a program who was all in on music learning theory.
Yeah.
So if you had students who were starting to do the lesson plans and jump right in from K, and then by the time they got to 5, you were all set up to do that. But I had a hard time because I wasn't in a system that used that. So I only used that for a couple of years. But then Standard of Excellence is what I've had for probably too long. 20 years.
Tried and true, though. I used Standard of Excellence for a long time. Probably, I don't know, at least our first 6 or 7 years that we were in Westbrook. And I found myself getting to concert E flat and concert F, that page. If you know Standard of Excellence, you know exactly what I'm talking about right now. And for the schedule that I had, that one section progressed too fast. I was seeing my students once, maybe twice a week. And so I was writing out all these supplementary exercises for concert E flat and concert F specifically. And then I found Sound Innovations, which literally had my written out supplemental exercises plopped right into those pages. And I was like, okay, I probably should just switch method books. So I've been using Sound Innovations for a while. The second book in that series is okay, but the progression is a little bit slower because they're assuming that you're doing a little bit more work in concert band, not as much in sectionals. So I've had to kind of bounce around with the second book. Kyle uses the second book sometimes for his freshman band. And it's been good. I don't think you can get by with any method book 100%. You have to find a way to make sure that you fill in the gaps where you're not happy, because there's so many variables with schedule. And with kids that you're teaching, honestly, sometimes kids need more than what the method book gives them.
Yes.
So,
one of the Facebook questions we have is somebody asks, have you looked into the method book Successful Habits for a Beginning Band Student? And what are your thoughts about it? But it sounds like you guys haven't.
nope, I haven't looked at that one at all.
Sorry, we can't help
I
you.
was at the Midwest Band Clinic in Chicago in December, and I was like, oh, I've heard about that.
Yeah.
So it was at the massive,
Habits
display,
of, right?
the display center that has all the things. So I flipped through it and I was like, that looks really interesting. And then I put it back on the shelf.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
so much to do there.
switching method books is like it's a lot of work. So you have to, I remember when I switched from Standard of Excellence to Sound Innovations, I got the conductor score. I studied it. I looked at it. I was like, okay, this is happening for this section at this point, this section for this point. I wanted to know how they dealt with going over the break. I wanted to know how they dealt with the first 6 notes. I wanted to know what supplemental exercises I was going to have to do even for that method. So yeah, I mean, switching method books is a big deal. And if you know what works, you can stay with what works. If you're not happy with what you're using, then it's probably worth the effort to look into something else.
So what are the some of the supplementary exercises you guys use? I want to know about that because the basic concept is if you know what your kids aren't getting in the method book, write that out, even if you use noteflight.com in a free way, or write it out so that they're doing the exercises you want to do. So a lot of teachers use supplemental material, and you can find a lot of free stuff online too for that. But let's start with flute.
I haven't used a whole lot of extra. Have you on flute specifically?
For flute, what I find in the method book that I'm using is that it doesn't get to a full concert B flat scale soon enough. So I've had to just kind of make sure that I'm teaching that a little bit earlier than what the method book does. I mean, I want to say it was like 110 exercises in or something like that in this method. So that's what I did just to compensate for that. The whole band doesn't really play it as a band until the clarinets are getting over the break, or I have the clarinets go down to a
Drop
low.
down.
I usually have them play up to A and then drop down to B and then C. But the other thing I do for flute regularly, as I mentioned, were head joint exercises. And then I do a lot of work with their hand position. So that's not going to be in a method book anywhere. It's just more checking out how they're playing things when they're playing them, making sure their fingers are rounded. I mean, even yesterday I was saying we were working on like a scale pattern thing. And I noticed that one of my students had their right hand fingers were really flat and they were hitting the trill keys. And I'm like, okay, so we're going to pause for a second and take care of that. And you think about it for one kid, but it's likely that every kid is not probably putting their fingers right where they should be. So that exercise becomes something for everybody.
And for clarinet, in the Standard of Excellence book, I try to get them down to those low notes and really comfortable down there. There's a song, number 111, it's one of those Go for Excellence songs that goes from low F up to low C, and on 8th note. So it really gets them moving, dexterity a little bit, moving down there. And then I give them a playing test on it to sort of up the ante on it. And by the time they are done with that, they can work down there. Then I try to get them the clarinets up over the break before we get to it in the book.
Yes. Us
Like
too.
I have an exercise where you can start on low A and then press a register key, and then you slide your first finger off the first hole.
Mhm.
And so it ends up being like da da da, but actually ends up da da scream.
Yeah.
And then you can go lift one finger. Now you're in B flat, da da da, and then da da da, and that sort of just gets them. You sort of trick them into getting up there, before they really have to. Because they start to panic when they get up.
And if somebody's looking for some of those, if you just Google search clarinet register exercises, there's PDFs everywhere.
Yes.
Well, and we also, I mean, I hope nobody gets upset for me saying this, but we do a lot of the supplemental work by rote. I don't always necessarily want the kids to be worried about reading everything when a skill is brand new. It gets their mind focused on, okay, I'm doing this with my fingers and my face, which is a lot for a kid to think about. Then when they start to really understand that, I mean, I'm just thinking about the low notes on clarinet, like they got to read how many lines are below the staff and they got to get their fingers down and those fingers have to cover the holes. And there's like a lot going on in their minds. So when we start doing stuff that's going to be exercises to cross the break, you know, I'm showing them this fingering. This is A, put your finger down for G, and I'm just going to watch their fingers and they're going to listen to themselves and they're not going to focus on, okay, that's got 2 lines and then that's 2 lines in a space. And that's a lot sometimes. They're going to read it eventually, but sometimes those exercises that are really hard like that, we take away the music for just a little bit and get them confident.
Well, like language acquisition.
Exactly.
Well, do you guys do covering exercises with the right hand, like on the open G and A? Do you do anything like that?
I don't
that
do a
has
lot of that.
Right hand covered.
Not till later.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will put a promotion out there. A lot of people know about John McAllister's music. Do you know John McAllister? He's got a great website. His whole mission is to make fundamentals fun for kids. And I did a couple episodes with him in a couple months ago. I forget what episode numbers they were. But that's really his mission. Like he has all these really cool cinematic backing tracks and things and lots of free resources. And because he was a band director and he just had to write out a lot of the stuff for his kids and lots of like exercises where they're working on the covering of the right hand and things like that. So the johnmcallistermusic.com is a great place to go for some of these.
Okay.
If you're looking for that, all the way from beginning band, all the way up through kind of into some grade 4 stuff.
Love it.
So, all right, saxophone.
Supplementary materials for saxophone. I think for saxophone, for us, when we're going to anything that's involving range extension or the other thing I'm thinking about is chromatic scale. Those two things don't happen early enough for saxophone for us. And sometimes you just need to vary what you're doing so that you're not always in the method book. So there's usually a logical time for us. It's usually around like end of 6th grade, beginning of 7th grade. We start doing some chromatic scale stuff that involves alternate fingerings. And so I call them the alternate fingerings the fancy keys. So I tell them about the fancy key that they need for alternate F sharp. That's nowhere in the book where we are right now. So that sometimes just has to happen, alternate C too. And then when they start learning anything below a D, that doesn't happen till way too late in the method books. So any of the low pinky keys, from anything lower than D on saxophone, we do just as like an extra exercise. Today we're going to be learning some new low notes on the saxophone, and it's like completely out of context, and they usually don't have any piece that it requires them to use it yet, but it's something that needs to be introduced way earlier than what the method book does usually. So.
Jerry Berry does the saxophones.
You could ask him.
So there's a Bob Minzer exercise, which I think is maybe a little bit beyond this, but it's basically like upper G above the staff, slurred down to D, slurred down to low G. So it's like 8-5-1, and they're opening up and playing that, and then they go down by half steps.
Yep.
So then they're working on like they're working on going down, and at some point in their grade, maybe they can only go to E or E flat or D or whatever. But that's when you start working into the D flat and the evil register, as I call it.
The evil register. Yeah. That's when you find out that their saxophone doesn't actually work well because they've been so hard on it for all that time.
Because they bought it at JCPenney.
And it was an ISO.
Yeah. All right, so let's move on to trumpet. What are some things you guys do for trumpets?
I am a trumpeter, and so early on, I play bugle songs just for fun for them, and it sort of gets in under their skin, and then they start trying to do it. We do a lot of mouthpiece buzzing. I play songs on the mouthpiece, and so it's just strengthening exercises are what's important on both the trumpet and the trombone, the baritone. Yeah.
Songs on the mouthpiece are so important, and we do those very early. I mean, really early. I'd say once they learn 3 notes, we're doing some stuff. Just take the exercise that they're working on in the book that has 3 notes, and everybody's playing it on your mouthpiece now.
In my exercise, in my experience, so the kids take the mouthpiece off and they do it, and then they're buzzing way too high, right? So what are some things you do, and do you have any ways?
Oh, you mean they're pinching and then it's...
Yeah, like they're supposed to be playing a G, but they're buzzing a B flat.
Oh, I see.
So
I don't worry about pitches. I'm trying to get at the 5th grade level. You're trying to get them to physically. It's harder to buzz on the mouthpiece than it is playing the trumpet. So if you can get them to just do siren sounds and stuff like that, that's going to improve. Then I have them. So I'll usually do this when we're trying to play something and we stop and they can't get up to the early on 2nd line G.
Yeah.
You know. So we take the mouthpieces off and we buzz up and down and everything. They put it back on and then they usually can get it.
Yep.
And it's like everything, it's a process.
Yep.
Maybe they won't get it that first day. But.
Yeah, I think it's just the idea that I can change my face to make a different sound on this mouthpiece by itself, and I don't need the valves to do it, is kind of something that they need to know very early.
And earlier you talked about T for clarinet and toe for saxophone, and you can use, for brass players, you can use those all the time, right?
Yes.
Toe to T and OE and all those things. So it's funny how the instruments are kind of all the same when it comes to the voicings.
Yeah. Yep.
I was just going to say something that I do, and I don't know if it's appropriate for this age or not, but if a kid is holding a note and they're really usually sharp, I'll have them loosen it in the lead pipe just a little bit, and then they'll play the note and then slowly pull the mouthpiece out as they're playing it, and then you'll hear the pitch go up. So then they'll put it back in, and then they'll play it again, and then slowly pull it out until the pitch stays the same. Because you know, as a trumpet player, you can buzz a B flat, but you're still going to get a G.
Yeah,
because the horn will keep you there.
What's the trick that you do with you're pulling out the tuning slide all the way?
That's a.
Is that not good? I shouldn't have said that.
No, it's a fun one. It's like a trumpet player thing. It's really cool. So I'll just say it.
Okay.
If you take the tuning slide off, I would never do this in beginning band.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So this is
that's
for
right. This is not beginning band
developing
appropriate.
your high school trumpet players. With no mouthpiece. With mouthpiece but no lead. With just a lead pipe, no tuning slide. It's a really bad sound, right? But if you play it as loud as possible, it's an F. It's a first space F.
Okay.
So if you play it as loud as you can for as long as you can, like do it a few times and then they'll get kind of winded and lightheaded. But then you put the tuning slide back on and then they play that same F. They have this enormous full sound because the no tuning slide makes them push all the air through.
They have to really push their air.
All of a sudden they get this huge sound without even trying, almost like a sound like you and I would get with just playing with this nice full sound.
I should try that because I'm not a trumpet player.
See if it works.
I'll let you know.
Any more of these supplementary exercises for the other instruments?
Well, I mentioned the Ted Reed Syncopation real quick. I highly encourage you, if you're not happy with the progression of your percussion method book, that is a great way to supplement. I literally was in a conversation with somebody on the beginning band group on Facebook about this exact thing. We ended up exchanging messages because I wanted to tell her more about it. And I said, just buy Ted Reed Syncopation and go write a list of tempos that you know work. For beginning band, most of our tempo work is like between 80 and 90 for a little while. So for beginners, you could assume that if you pick a track that's 80 to 90 beats per minute, and you pick out that quarter note, quarter rest page, and then the quarter note, eighth note page, it's probably going to work out pretty well for you. And you can work on sticking. You can work on making sure their grips are right. By the way, if you don't use this already, the Vic Firth drumsticks have the little flag on the stick, which is really awesome for making sure that their hand is in the right position and that their grip is right. So I use that.
Yeah, I removed the percussionist from the group method book by 6th grade.
Yep, because they just don't get what they need.
They don't get. I've never found a group method book that did well by percussion.
So I use that, and then it's the Fresh Approach Mallets book. Can't remember the name of it. Am I right? Is that what it is?
I think that's what it's called.
So I use that. I use those 2 method books
What's the drum one you use?
It's Ted Reed Syncopation.
Oh, okay.
Kyle put together like a percussion book because he teaches percussion class at the high school, and I use half of that book for my 7th and 8th graders.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I start using Alfred drum method in 6th grade.
Yep.
The Ted Reed Syncopation book, at least part of it was designed for the modern drummer. So it was designed for like jazz drum set players to create some left-hand patterns. And it's the same one that we use in the jazz curriculum when you're playing with a swing backing track and the kids are moving to the music, moving side to side, patting the backbeat and singing those rhythms. So these same rhythms of syncopated rhythms or quarters and eighths or whatever are the same thing we use to develop their jazz language.
But lesson 1 is like you have never read music before, and all you have is a quarter note and a quarter rest and different combinations of
And I
that,
love how it
so-
starts with quarter notes, not whole notes.
Yes.
Because keeping the beat is like got to be step 1 before you do anything like that.
Oh yeah. So speaking of supplemental things, the percussion method books often start with whole notes, and we start with mallet players, right? And so the kids are hitting the note and like, oh my gosh, it's a nightmare. So I will put on either a track or an amplified metronome so that they literally can feel this is a beat. It is not something. I mean, a lot of kids they can't count right away when they're coming to you. So
duration is the issue in
it is
percussion.
totally the issue. It's totally the issue. And so, I mean, you can't get those downbeats to happen without some help for them.
Well, I always tell kids, this is a whole note. This is a half note. This is a quarter note. This is an eighth note. That's the problem.
That's the problem. That's the problem. Yeah. So that's important too.
All right. So we have a couple Facebook questions, and we're going to talk about some of your favorite beginning band pieces, but I want to make sure we get anything else that we may have missed as well. How do you find the right instrument that's right for your student and for your program, short-term and long-term? I think we covered that.
We did, except we didn't talk about the instrumentation needs of the band, which is something that we both Larry and I, when we deliver that information to the family about the instrument that we feel is the best match or one that would be extremely challenging for them at the beginning, we also ask them to consider the needs of the band. And so clarinet is number 1. That's going to be the most number of students that we'll have. And then the least number would be percussion and flute. And I stick pretty close to that. I do.
Isn't trombone there at the 2?
Oh, trombone is like number 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do say to the parents that some sections are going to fill because they fill every year. They just do. So plan on having a first choice and a second choice. I haven't had a year since I've done this that flute hasn't filled, that saxophone hasn't filled, and percussion hasn't filled.
Yeah.
So
there's some programs where they have online. Like Caitlin does this.
Yes.
She has an online thing, and
Yeah.
if you don't, it won't allow you to choose an instrument that's already been filled.
Yep.
I've never had the courage enough to do that.
I have not done that. And it does lead to some interesting conversations when parents, send in their form a week before band's going to start and they want their kid to play flute and it's full, but they do kind of understand. I mean, it's in the end, it's what's best for the band. We're not thinking about your one kid. We're thinking about the needs of every kid so that everybody has a great experience.
But sometimes that last kid to just jump in at the end ends up being the leader in a few years.
Yep, it could be. And you're obviously taking the risk of saying that you're trying to do what's right for everybody. And I have had kids, even at the high school, say, I have always, since 5th grade, wanted to play the flute. And they make their way there. It's very interesting. But, at our high school, we have an intro to band class. We have 2 concert band classes. And a lot of kids in high school will decide they really want to play that second instrument that they didn't get to play when they're in 5th grade. So in the end, sticking to it is important.
Well, you want to have an administrator that understands what you're doing and is willing to go to the mat with you if they have to.
I honestly have not had like a situation where it was going to be extremely problematic for me if I didn't keep my, bearings on and like keep my foot down about that particular instrument or whatever. Like for the most part, people get it. Because it's been established.
But in general, when was the last time you said I have too many trombones or too many clarinets?
When you're talking about instrumentation, I think every band director sort of overemphasizes how many trombones you need. Because if you really had a band where the second highest number was in trombone. It would probably be too much trombone.
Probably too much trombone.
But
Yep.
you overshoot so that you get.
Well, because so many of those
some.
kids will go to tuba and euphonium and all
Yeah.
that too. So
Yep.
Sure, there's other places you can put them.
Yeah.
I love having tons of trumpets for that reason.
Yep.
You know, because they can go off to baritone really easily.
Yep.
You can do tuba. you know.
Horn.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So the final question we have here is from Leslie. I'd like to know some tried and true strategies for brass players who are struggling with partials. I've used the ping pong ball trick. I'm actually curious. Do you know what the ping pong ball trick is? I don't either. So maybe she'll have to tell us.
Yeah.
To help them feel the airstream and how it helps a bit. But I need some other strategies to help them understand how to go higher and lower.
I will say,
Whistling helps.
Whistling
If they
does
whistle
help.
low to high, it's the same thing you need to do with your mouth.
But
Anyway.
another plug for doing mouthpiece
Yes.
testing. It's really, I have had so many less minutes spent on this one issue since I have done mouthpiece testing. I mean, you can do all the remedial work you want, but if a kid is not well matched for a trumpet, I am speaking for personal experience here. I am not well matched for the trumpet. You can't see Kyle's face right now. But I'm just not a good match for that instrument. And I've tried and tried and tried all the different exercises and stuff, but I fight it because I'm just not a good match for that instrument. So that's number one. Obviously, you're going to have some kids probably who pick it anyway, and then you're going to be in this situation. So then whistling, of course, is a really helpful
Mouthpiece
tool.
buzzing, the siren sounds, the songs on the mouthpiece.
Yep.
Yeah. The bugle songs. To re-emphasize what you said, if you do the suitability testing, I really haven't had that problem in a long time.
No, well, it's been a long time.
And kids will say, you know, they'll come out of the testing and they'll be like, well, I'm not really good at trumpet, and I think I'll do, you know, I really got that sound out of the flute. They get it.
Yeah.
You know, it's
They
pretty
know.
obvious.
Yeah. Well, because kids don't want to do something that's going to be painfully hard for them.
Right.
And they aren't going to really want to fight that unless they're the type of kid that's used to that. There are definitely kids out there, we've had plenty of them, who are just, they love working hard and it doesn't bother them at all. But there does come a point where it's like, well, having something that is already naturally challenging be a little bit easier is going to make for more success and more motivation in the beginning.
And sometimes for those trumpet players that are really struggling, sometimes you move them to baritone and they sound like $1 million.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Just the different thing. And I will say, again, you're right. Everybody has to have music aptitude and be really good. But at a lot of levels, the baritone part is easier than, and a mediocre baritone player is more valuable than a mediocre trumpet player.
Sure. Yeah.
At least that's what I found. That's what I found. All right, let's go on to some of your favorite pieces for beginning band. So what would you classify beginning? It's some people say it just says beginning band. Some people it's 0.5.
Oh man,
No,
what a
no.
nightmare.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out what people say beginning band actually is.
No. When programming, I have always erred on the side of easier.
Same.
Okay. People get in trouble when they try to program with their ego, like so that they can go to the all-state conference and say that, you know, my fifth
band
grade
did
band did that 1.5 grade piece. Did they really?
Did they really?
But so one that I've really always liked, there's an arrangement of Overture 1812, that just the da, 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 da part that is beautifully written. I can't remember who the arranger is, but
Publisher? Remember the publisher?
No.
Okay.
Power Rock is a favorite. It's We Will Rock You, and another one, Bites the Dust, a la fifth grade.
Yep.
So that one's always a big favorite. Bugler's Dream is the Olympic theme in 5 notes, you know, and kids, though that's fun to do on an Olympic year because kids it ties into what they're excited about. Those were 3 right off the top of my head. But if Krystle starts talking, some more might come to me.
Okay, I was going to say I just wrote yours down. So I like a lot of the works by Paul Lavender. So I have done. But well, keep in mind, everybody, my last concert of the year is our big all city bash. So it's basically all of the kids in Westbrook who play an instrument on one concert, and our 5th grade opens it up. So I've done Homework Blues by Paul Lavender for that concert. We're doing this year Rock This Band by Robert Sheldon. That's been a classic for the last couple of years.
Because that's in the Sound Innovations, but there's also an
Yes.
arrangement of it.
Yes. So it's the 50th exercise in the Sound Innovations book, but he wrote a band piece that uses the same theme that's written out in the method book for the A section that repeats at the end too. And then he wrote a different, like a B section that's not in the method book to make the piece more complete. And then Gallant March, I've used many times. I believe that's Sweeney. And High Adventure, also by Paul Lavender. Those are great. Like if your beginning band is in like 6-note territory, which that's really where mine is, I'll be very honest with you. I definitely get to a low concert A and start developing their full concert B flat scale, but that's not really what happens at the end of the year for us. So we're really in like 6-note territory when we finish. Sometimes I can get them up to like a concert A flat, but I struggle to find beginning band pieces that are, like Larry said, that are going to work, that are easy enough, and that are going to accomplish all the things that I want, which is not just playing notes and rhythms. We got to do a lot more
That's
than that.
interesting enough.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
you can make some music out of it.
Exactly. Yep.
I always think of Lamb Chop Rock.
Oh
Because
yeah.
Phil, you did that all the time.
That was
Yeah.
Phil Rich's
Oh.
piece, Lamb Chop Rock.
A really oldie but goodie is shortening bread. There's an arrangement of shortening bread that is super cute, and it has the the dum 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 dum, and the trumpets play a not a high C, a third space C, and it sort of gets them jazzed to try go for that C.
Yeah, that's
each
great.
time. So that's a
great.
fun one.
And you have to do it carefully, but it is important as a trumpet player. I think we would probably agree that asking kids to play higher is
Yep.
the first key to getting kids to play higher.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
So, getting them out of their comfort range without putting them in the position at a concert to sound bad doing it.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. I make an agreement with my kids that I will never put them in front of an audience and have them sound bad.
Yep.
And so I want to encourage young band directors to not be afraid to postpone or drop a piece. You want to try to not do it, 2 weeks before the concert, but when something's not working, or you started a piece and didn't realize how difficult this certain thing. This happens a lot to young band directors, is they sort of think, oh, I love that piece, and they put it in, and then it's like, eesh, it's just not working. Don't be afraid. Cut it.
I literally just did that this year. This is insane that we're having this conversation right now, but I haven't done it in a while, or had to do it in a while. I really I listen to the pieces a lot, and I listen to them with my students in mind. So I don't tend to make that mistake, but I listened to this piece. It was, I think it's a Randall Standridge piece, American Declaration. It's such an awesome, well-arranged piece of music. And I programmed it for my 7th grade. And the kids heard it and they loved it. And the percussion parts were coming together so smoothly. And then half the band, the parts were not coming.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, wow. And it was a grade 1.5. And so I was like, my band plays grade 1.5. This should definitely work. And then when I was listening to the parts, I was like, yes, this is challenging here. This is challenging here, but I think they're going to get it. And about a month before the concert, I was like, this isn't happening. And it's not gonna be a big deal if I pull this, because the program is complete without it.
Yeah.
But sometimes you
So-
start it the next year when they're in 8th grade,
I was
start it
gonna
at the
say,
beginning of the year.
The kids loved the piece, and
Yeah.
they didn't believe me that they, when I said it's just not right for right now, they're like, no, it's fine, we love it. I'm like, yeah, I know, but I'm the professional here, and let's wait till 8th grade. You're gonna sound amazing on it next year. So
And my thing, another piece with me is I could make them play it, but to push them that hard is not worth it sometimes.
no, and we had other things we were working on, and I was like, I'd rather spend the time making this more musical, and that's going to take time too.
Yeah.
So
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't trust the grading of the pieces.
Yeah.
All grade 1 pieces were not all created equal.
It's the truth. It's the truth.
I don't think we can finish an episode without me bringing up my favorite piece. Do you know Aunt Rhodey's Appetite?
Aunt Rhodey's
Oh my
Appetite.
gosh.
This is
didn't somebody play this at the.
This is the coolest
Elizabeth,
novelty
Yeah.
thing.
It's the coolest novelty piece in the whole world. It's Joseph Campello. So do you want to tell it from your perspective?
No,
want me to-
I just remember being hilarious.
Okay, it is hilarious. If I had fifth grade in my old format of having a spring concert that was just for fifth grade, this is the piece I would do. And I would do it almost every year because it was just so darn hilarious. But it basically takes every nursery rhyme theme that your fifth graders know, starting with Go Tell Aunt Rhody. And the main character is Aunt Rhody, and there's a narrator who narrates throughout the skit. Aunt Rhody has her own part. There's a French chef. There's a golden goose. And basically the whole story is Aunt Rhody is going to cook the goose for her holiday dinner. And Pierre comes in with the hot cross buns, and then the goose has to lightly row away. And I mean, it is just hilarious. There's a funeral march that's written out, and one kid in the band holds up a rubber chicken. It's just incredible. And the kids love it because they get to totally be part of the show.
Nice.
And you get to bring in some other adults to play those characters.
You bring in some other adults and you do some costuming and props. And yeah, it was like such a great piece. I think some of the older kids still talk about it.
Nice.
So yeah, but that's definitely, I can't do it with our format right now. So if I get back to having a fifth grade spring concert, it's the first thing I'm going to program back on there.
Fun.
Yeah.
So I usually like to wrap up the episodes with like this sort of message to band directors, things you've learned and what you'd like pass on to them. You did one of those just recently about programming at the right level for your kids, under program and things like that. But that's what I'd like to leave it at. So can we have a discussion like if you were able to take any of your lessons and put them into people who are teaching young band, either for the first time or their new teachers, what would those lessons be?
Lessons about how to be successful or how to
Yeah.
make your program successful.
Yeah.
You have to be actively involved in the scheduling process.
Yes.
It cannot be done by anybody else, no matter how well intended and how much your principal cares about your program. They think they know what you need, but they don't.
Yeah.
I see my fifth graders 4 times a week in 3 different settings, and that didn't just happen. I had to push for it and figure out where they needed to go. You could be the best teacher in the world, but if you don't see your kids in the proper format or have enough minutes, your program's not going to happen. So it's a
Scheduling is
boring
everything.
topic, but it's really, really important.
Yeah, scheduling is everything. I've been in Westbrook. How many years have you been in Westbrook? You keep telling me something different than
17.
I think. Okay, 17. All right, we've been 17. 17 years in Westbrook. I've run 16 schedules. Every single year, there is a reason why the schedule has to change. And I have been in so many scheduling meetings, and I don't let them go through another stage on the schedule without like waving my hands, being like, remember me over here? I need to see this schedule because this schedule has a direct impact on whether this group of students that I have is going to be successful or not. And that's how big of a deal it is. One year they tried to get the schedule past me. And so they like got it passed and they decided, okay, this is the schedule. And I looked at it and I was like, this is ugly. This is really not good. And we have a culture in Westbrook, thankfully, where parents know if I say a schedule isn't going to work, they start making noise about it. And I was so thankful that they backtracked on that schedule. It was like, okay, here she is again. Like now we're at the point 17 years in where I get to see the schedule before it goes through and I get to give my stamp of approval on it or not, if it's going to work.
And again, there's always good intent.
Oh yeah.
And they think that they know what
But they
you
just
need.
don't. A flute class
Well,
is
how
not
could
the
they?
same. Right,
Yeah,
right.
they're not in it.
I mean, even just last year, I had a guidance counselor ask me if this kid who plays a saxophone could just join the flute class. And I was like, nope, he can't. And it was like, well, why not? And then I had to explain it again. And I was like, this is just, I know how this works because I'm the professional here and I can't expect that you do.
And the reason why you're successful is I'm sure that you've developed relationships with people. That you have to develop relationships with the different teachers that you work with, and that develops trust.
Yeah.
And so,
and that you're
it all
always
works
thinking
together.
about the kids. This isn't about me and my program and my needs and how it's going to be easier for me as a teacher. It's about me setting up what's right for the kids. So I say that a lot too. Like this isn't about me advocating for the program. It's about so that when the kids are in this program, they are successful.
Yep.
So.
My schedule this year is extremely inconvenient for me, but it works for the
It
kids.
works for the kids. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yep.
I'm all for it.
Yep.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.